All right, let's get right into it. On January 30th, 1948, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. Now, the killer confessed, and his motive? It seemed pretty straightforward. But here we are over 70 years later, and the real why behind this assassination is still a huge point of debate. So, was it just a spontaneous act of political anger, or was it the final move in a conflict that had been brewing for a century? Let's dig in. To really understand this story, we have to start with the man himself. There's this powerful quote from Gandhi that really gets to the heart of his entire philosophy. For him, nonviolence wasn't about being passive. No, it was this active, incredibly courageous art of dying for what you believe in. And that whole philosophy was put to the ultimate test on that evening in Delhi. Gandhi was just walking to his daily prayer meeting, like he always did, when he was shot. 3 times at point-blank range. The act itself was just brutal and quick, but the reasons behind it? Oh, they're anything but simple. The killer, Nathuram Godse, never once denied what he did. Actually, he owned it completely. He even gave this super long statement in court, laying out all his reasons and creating a story that honestly has stuck around for decades. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's not even close? Okay, so let's break down the two completely different stories at the heart of this. We've got what Godse claimed, and then we have what a deeper historical analysis suggests was really going on. So on one hand, you have Gandhi's version. He presents his actions as a gut reaction to things that had just happened, the final straw. But on the other hand, our source material argues that the assassination was actually the climax of this deep ideological war, a plot that was literally years in the making and involved a whole group of dedicated conspirators. Let's start with Gandhi's side of the story. He gave a few key reasons, but there's one that you hear about more than any other. This number, 55 crore rupees. It's absolutely central to the popular story of why Gandhi had to die. Now, for anyone not familiar, 1 crore is 10 million. So we're talking about 550 million rupees. Godse framed this payment to Pakistan as a massive betrayal of India. Right there in his court statement, he said it plain as day. He claimed that Gandhi went on a fast unto death for one reason and one reason only, to force the Indian government to give this money to the brand new and at that point rival nation of Pakistan. For Godse, this was just the ultimate act of appeasement, the final betrayal. But okay, the source material paints a very different picture. It argues this money wasn't some kind of gift. It was a financial settlement. It was Pakistan's agreed-upon share of the treasury of British India when the country was split. India had already paid the first chunk. Withholding the second installment? That would have meant breaking an international agreement, which could have seriously damaged India's reputation right as it was stepping onto the world stage. And this is where Godse's story really starts to fall apart. The evidence shows that Godse and his circle had tried to kill Gandhi before. Multiple times, actually, long before this whole 55 crore issue ever even came up. This suggests the payment wasn't the cause at all. It was just a convenient excuse for something they already wanted to do. So, if it wasn't just about the money, what was it really about? Well, to understand that, the source argues we need to rewind the clock, way back, long before partition, to a very specific time and place in India. The source traces the real roots of this all the way back to 19th century Maharashtra. It points to the fall of the Peshwa kingdom in 1818, which created this profound sense of lost power and prestige among a very specific group, the Chitpawan Brahmins. This anger, this resentment, it fueled a very conservative political ideology that was completely against social reformers and, eventually, against everything Gandhi stood for. And this movement found its most powerful voice in V.D. Savarkar, a man whose ideas completely captivated Nathuram Godse. So this term you see here, Chitpawan Brahmin, it's absolutely key to the source's argument. According to the source, this community, which included Godse and many of his fellow conspirators, was at the very center of this ideological movement. Their entire story was about lost glory and a deep desire to bring back a very specific kind of past, a vision that just could not exist alongside Gandhi's idea of a secular, inclusive India. So, you see, this wasn't the work of one man acting alone. It was a group a group of people all united by this powerful shared ideology. So let's take a look at who they actually were. When you look at the conspirators, you realize these weren't some master criminals. They were editors, teachers, hotel owners, pretty ordinary guys. But what tied them all together? According to the source, it was a deep ideological connection to V.D. Savarkar and his organizations. I mean, Godse edited a newspaper that was funded by Savarkar. Apte managed it. The others were all active members, all drinking from the same ideological well. And look, this wasn't just some loose book club. The Kapoor Commission, that was a formal government inquiry set up in the 1960s to reinvestigate the whole thing. They came to a pretty damning conclusion. They said that the evidence was, and I quote, destructive of any theory other than the conspiracy to murder by Savarkar and his group. And to really get inside their mindset, the source points to this other chilling detail. Before they finally got to Gandhi, the group's original target was Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. They only scrapped that plan because he'd already left for Karachi. That tells you a lot, right? It shows a real commitment to using political violence as a tool to get what they wanted. Now, while Godse and his direct accomplices were convicted pretty quickly, the source argues that the full story didn't really come out for many, many years. And that brings us to the formal government inquiry that I mentioned, the Kapoor Commission. The whole case was basically blown wide open again in 1964. An associate of the conspirators came forward and publicly stated that he knew about the assassination plot before it happened. I mean, can you imagine? This stunning confession forced the government to create a new commission of inquiry, led by Justice Jawaharlal Kapoor, to finally uncover the whole truth. And the Kapoor Commission was incredibly thorough. They went back over all the old evidence, but crucially, they heard brand new testimony. Savarkar's own personal secretary and his bodyguard testified that Godse and Apte were visiting Savarkar all the time, right before the murder. So based on this new information, the commission reached its final conclusion. The assassination was the work of a fanatical group operating under Savarkar's direct influence. And here's the thing. This wasn't some new idea that only came up decades later. As the source points out, India's very own Home Minister at the time, the powerful Sardar Patel, basically said the same thing in a private letter to Prime Minister Nehru right after the murder. He identified the killers as a, quote, fanatical wing of the Hindu Mahasabha directly under Savarkar. So at the end of the day, we're left with two completely different stories. You've got the killer's claim that this was a righteous, spontaneous act against a traitor, and then you have the official inquiry's finding that this was a long-planned conspiracy born from a deep ideological war. The basic facts of what happened aren't in dispute, but the why, that's still a battleground. And it leaves us with a pretty big question. History isn't just about what happened, it's about who gets to tell the story. So what happens when that story is still being fought over, right now, today?